This video is purely for harm reduction and does not promote the use of drugs.
Now, I know there's enough salvia trip reports out there, but most are about someone trying it with little to no experience with psychedelics. So I thought I'd share my first experiences with salvia, having tried LSD, shrooms, DMT, and many more psychs, collectively about 100 times. I would say I'm pretty experienced with psychedelics, and I was waiting until I could say that before I let myself even try salvia, just having read a lot about it. So technically my first time was chewing it, though I barely felt anything and it tasted a little bit grim, so I decided smoking it would be a better way to get to know Lady Salvia. I know the Maztecs say you shouldn't smoke it, but I disagree, and I'll make another video on that whole topic in the future. Having had a lot of trips, I know how insanely powerful psychedelics can get, so I was very careful. It's worth noting that salvia has a reverse tolerance. If you do decide to try it, I would not do it recreationally, and I would also start with a very low dose as I did. So me and my mate met up to try salvia together. I wanted to dip my toes in at a very low dose alone first to see how it affected me, so I weighed out 120 mg of plain leaves, not extract. If you have extracts, I'll also have a guide to that in the future, but definitely do your own research. I was mildly anxious because of what I had read, and I was kind of going through mood swings of being very excited and curious one moment to feeling anxious and worried the next, but the second I took it, I felt a very deep peace and relaxation as I just accepted that all states were being imagined by me. I didn't really feel this dose that intensely. At most, I noticed blurry moving shapes with eyes closed and meditating, but no open eye visuals, though my perspective did change and things looked a little bit more flat. So I met my mate and we both loaded 150 mg into the pipe. At this point, I really just wanted to get to know Lady Salvia and develop a relationship with her. So I was hitting it. With plain leaves you have to take way more hits, and with extract, so it's a lot harder on the lungs, but at the same time it's a lot easier to control and I would say mentally safer. I finished the bowl and I started getting these visions of things transforming and splicing into each other. It was quite a physical feeling, and I remember almost feeling like I was the things I imagined, like I was embodying them. I distinctly remember splicing into a blurry butterfly, and I felt like I was flapping my wings in slow motion before I would splice into something else. I'm hesitant to compare the intensity to anything because it varies so much that there's not even a point, but for the sake of the trip report, I'll say the intensity was roughly equal to 100 micrograms of LSD. Though this dose might feel like 10 micrograms or 1000 micrograms for you. So start slow and be careful with the reverse tolerance. Seriously, that shit reverses more than your girlfriend at the club, and it definitely caught me off guard in my next dose. I tried meditating into it as deep as I could go. Interestingly, it wasn't like meditating on other psychedelics where you could basically break through by just letting go more and more and more, even at low doses. It felt more like the intensity of that dose was a lot more fixed, though that could change as I experiment more with it, so who knows. I also tried to communicate with Sally and tried calling to it, but there wasn't really any sense of entities or otherness. So after that, we tried it once again. This time we both wanted an intense experience to really see what Sally has to offer. We loaded up 250 mg, and boy did it hit me way harder than I expected. This is why you have to be careful. Arrowhead considers 250 mg a light dose. Now you listen to this and tell me if you think this was a light dose. So as I'm toking, things are getting more and more intense. I'm only halfway and they're already more than the 150 mg. I keep toking and they're starting to get not overwhelming, but definitely further than I'd like to go for a third time with Sally. My perception starts changing drastically and I start to feel these very physical turning and gravity-like sensations in weird directions. Though what was way more obvious to me at the time was that I was forgetting things very, very quickly. I put down the pipe and I close my eyes and start rapidly getting more and more confused as I'm losing control of everything happening to me. It didn't really feel like I was manifesting an experience with my thoughts like LSD or DMT. It felt more like this filter was being removed and I was seeing reality behind the scenes. Like I had this sense that had been turned off and dormant for ages. I think Joe Rogan puts this perfectly.
If you did not have a nose, and you could live your whole life without a sense of smell in the year 2012, it's very possible. If someone farted in front of you, you'd have no idea that this terrible gas is you're inhaling. It's in your nose. You wouldn't have that sense of smell. Okay. So you could exist and not have any idea because gas is invisible. It exists, but it is invisible. There could be many things around us that are also invisible, but we have not developed any means to detect them.
Okay. For a little bit, I felt extremely vulnerable until I finally just relaxed and then let all my anxieties flow away. Once I realized I had no expectations of myself to do anything, I allowed the experience to just happen, and I realized that my body had actually completely changed forms. I didn't have a human body at all. I actually actually now had multiple bodies and they were literally cogs and gears. This was easily one of the most, if not the most alien, weird feelings I have ever felt. It reminded me of the combination of nitrous and psychedelics without the euphoria and still very different. Until that moment, I did not know that consciousness could get that twisted as a human, even having tripped quite a lot, and my body was literally these multiple objects. I don't know how it can get any weirder than that. To some extent, I was still in my ego because I knew the experience would end, though I didn't know I'd taken a drug, and I remember just knowing that the experience had begun and will end and is not eternal. Even though it definitely is as well, and it definitely felt like it, which is an explanation for another video. This didn't feel like a fake hallucination either, it felt a lot more real than reality. If you've tried DMT, you probably know that feeling of things feeling more real than reality. This felt even more real than DMT, but in a totally different way. It felt like there was this physical reality that was encompassing our reality completely, that was actually just dictating everything that was happening. The trippiest part is that these cogs that I was were actually spinning and moving each other. The force that was making them spin felt very fundamental. It felt like they had always been spinning and always would be spinning. It felt more fundamental than gravity. In a way, it felt exactly like gravity, but the way it spanned the cogs really mindfucked me. Like they had been spinning for eternity and will continue to spin for eternity, and my awareness or consciousness had just shifted into them. It also felt very inanimate, lifeless, and mechanical, like this is just what it does, always and forever. What really sets this apart from other psychedelics is that there were basically no visuals. Instead, there was just this deep feeling of a shift in bodily form, which also caused my vision to change because I was looking at myself, but it wasn't the mind-blowing aspect of the experience. I lost most sense of time. It didn't really feel long like many other trips I've had, but I could have just been forgetting the experience as it happened, kind of like dreams. I quickly became comfortable and started meditating as deep as I could, trying to figure out the experience, and then very clearly saw an image of how these cogs were actually like 1% of what was really going on. The best way I can describe it is it felt like I was a cell in Sally space and I smoked the salvia, and then I became the being made up of the cells, and then I realized as that being that there's actually a whole fucking universe out there. Even though I was really approaching a breakthrough, I think 1 or 2 more hits and I would have broken through. I saw how I had just dipped my toe into the water and there was still an ocean to explore. I realized that the ocean was infinitely deep. I could see how this sense of being inanimate objects could expand out forever and I could experience lifetimes of it. This freaked me out a little bit because even though I was having a good time, I could feel how the substance was dysphoric and I could sense where it could go if someone isn't careful with it. I personally enjoyed it because of my curiosity and excitement to explore this realm of consciousness, and I've done it a few times since and had a great time, but salvia is powerful as fucking shit.
Being in my body right now and feeling like I can like control my legs, holy fuck, guys. Salvia doesn't fucking play around.
I also tried to communicate with any entities, but it was totally lonely, like nothing was there. It just really added to that lifeless, inanimate feeling that I felt. Once I started coming down, things kept spinning, but they started spinning in on themselves. Like, imagine something orbiting a planet, but also falling towards the planet slightly with each orbit. That's the best description I can give you. Another thing I noticed is that towards the come down, I stopped being these cogs and I became this circle, and the circle was doing the orbiting. But I realized that the circle wasn't the thing that was moving, it was more reality moving around the circle, kind of like how we used to believe that the universe orbits the earth. Another effect I had was this feeling that everything was very, very close to me, like pressed up against me. I opened my eyes and just started saying, holy shit, what the fuck, that was insane. I really had no idea how to communicate to my mate what he was about to experience. So afterwards we went out and we got seshed, we smoked a good amount of weed and I came home pretty fucking high. I decided I'd give salvia another go because I wanted to see the synergy of weed and salvia. If you want to watch that trip report, I'm going to include it as a bonus video on my Patreon. I think it's a cool trip report with loads of insights, so I'll put it up in the lowest tier and I'd really appreciate you coming on board and supporting the channel. Otherwise, feel free to give the video a like if you liked it and subscribe if you want videos about literally anything to do with psychedelics. Leave your suggestions below. I appreciate all your awesome comments, and I'll leave you with one thing. I personally would not try salvia until you're fairly experienced with tripping, and regardless, go really slow. It's nothing like any other drug I've ever tried, and I've tried like 40 as of this video. It felt as powerful or more powerful than DMT, and that's saying something. I think chewing it is a much better option for most people. Love you guys, see you all next week.